economy remains top of mind for voters. JP Morgan Chase CEO said the U.S. is likely to enter a recession in the next 9 months. Bank of America says the U.S. could start losing 175,000 jobs a month. Gas prices are on the rise again. Should the American people prepare for a recession?
No. Look, they've been saying this now. How every 6 months they say this.
Listen to
every
how
6
he
months they
can't
look
finish
down the
a
next 6
sentence.
months and see what's going to happen.
Look.
It hadn't happened yet. It hadn't. There is no.
Can't finish a sentence.
There's no guarantee that they're going to. I don't think there will be a recession. If
Cannot
it is, it'll be a very
finish a
slight
sentence.
recession. That is, we'll move down slightly. Well, look, think about what's happened. We have
Just
done
wait for the
more,
punchline
we're in a
of this,
better
by the way.
position than any other major country in the world, economically and politically. We still have real problems, but look what we got done.
Look.
We passed
Watch this
so much
now.
legislation
What?
that significantly makes a point about.
We're going to end
for
it there.
example, the American Rescue Plan.
Did I just kick myself out of the stream? I didn't. You know damn well that if they could have edited out that section of Joe Biden dropping his cue card notes, whatever it was, they would have, but they couldn't because it was so integrally woven into his rambling, incoherent response. And if Joe Biden had a cue card of notes, a cheat sheet, it means he had a cheat sheet of the questions Jake the fake tapper was asking him. And they could not get that. They couldn't edit that gaffe out of that interview in as much as they wanted to. All right. We've got a guest who's got a hard out at 8 o'clock. I would like to let people trickle in as we do this because of the time constraints. We're not going to cut this and go to Rumble halfway through. We're just going to stay on YouTube. But before we get into it, while everyone trickles in, yes, Alex Jones, just a nifty little $965 million verdict. Because there's multiple plaintiffs. It's not $1 billion against one plaintiff. It's 16 plaintiffs, some getting 50 million, some getting 120 million. We're going to talk about it. But before we do anything, and before I bring in the guest who's in the backdrop along with Robert Barnes, I'm going to thank the sponsor again of today's show, a product that I use, and it sounds kitschy and whatever. Home Title Lock, people, is if you own a property and you own your home, and apparently it's a type of fraud that's relatively prevalent in the United States. People borrow against your home. And so you think you own your property. They take your quit claim deed, whatever, forge your signature, borrow money against your house. And then you don't find out until people say, you owe the bank $50,000 because Joe Schmo forged your signature and now you owe it. HometitleLock.com/Viva. And $20 a month. If someone pulls your deed from the registry, wherever it is, you'll get notified. They will freeze any sort of borrowing that can be affected against your property. And, you know, if you own property, despite what Rich Dad Poor Dad says, it's your biggest asset. $20 a month is kind of a decent insurance. And just to also double verify everything, I ran this by my house insurance as to whether or not this is real fraud and whether or not this is a legit product, and confirmed, and then I signed up myself. Okay, everyone is trickling in. I'm going to bring them in a little earlier than that. I also just want to thank sponsors who have the cojones to sponsor the rabble, the fringe minority, the hinged, fringed, and proud, unacceptable views, people like myself. It's great. Alex got screwed. This is an injustice. It's beyond that. And yeah, that we'll talk about at length tomorrow. Tonight, we have Mike Davis, founder of the Article 3 Project. And I see in the chat, a lot of you didn't know what the Article 3 Project was, and a lot of you went to the website, and it's interesting. We're going to bring him in. It's going to be an interesting discussion. Hard out at 8 o'clock, so we'll be staying on YouTube and Rumble for this entire stream. Let me bring in Mike first. Mr. Davis, how goes the battle, sir?
I'm doing very well. I fight the battle every day. I'm having fun.
I've been watching a lot of your interviews today, and I know now firsthand the degree to which you're battling you're fighting the battles. Let me bring in Barnes and put myself on the bottom so I only cover my face. Okay, Mike, thank you for coming on. This is going to be phenomenal. I'm not going to delve too much into your childhood because we have time constraints, but 30,000-foot overview for those who may not know who you are, what the Article 3 Project is. Overview, and then we're going to get into some details.
So I'm Mike Davis. I am from Iowa. I went to the University of Iowa for undergrad and law school, got involved in politics, interned for Speaker Newt Gingrich during Clinton's impeachment, went back, started Students for George W. Bush across the state of Iowa, got involved very heavily in the Bush campaign, went to work for Senator Chuck Grassley, my home state senator, after I graduated. Then I went and worked in the Bush 43 administration, went to law school at Iowa, campaigned the whole time, went back to the Bush 43 White House, helped with the hiring and firing of political appointees. That's where I met Neil Gorsuch. He helps him get into the Justice Department, helps him get onto the 10th Circuit, and then he dragged me out to Colorado. I was one of his first clerks, was a civil litigator in Colorado for 10 years, and then Gorsuch dragged me back out to D.C. to help him get set up to get confirmed and set up on the Supreme Court. And then I was going to go back to Denver. I had a good life there, and I got mired in the swamp. Chuck Grassley's office called again. They wanted me to be the chief counsel for nominations for Trump's first 2 years. And so we helped Trump set records for the number of judges he appointed to the bench. And then I was going to go back to Colorado, and I keep getting roped into starting these groups and doing these fights. And so I started the Article 3 project to, at the time, it was to fight to confirm President Trump's judicial nominees. Now it's opposing Biden's nominees. It's defending constitutionalist judges. Once they get to the bench, they have lifetime tenure, they have pay protection, but they're still humans. And so I like to defend them, like Clarence Thomas, when they go after him and his wife, when they go after my old boss, Gorsuch, for killing Sonia Sotomayor with his mask, mask gate on the Supreme Court, silly things like that. I also started the Internet Accountability Project, which goes after big tech from the right on antitrust, Section 230, and data privacy. And so I have my hands full. I'm defending Trump on the Mar-a-Lago raid. I'm defending the rule of law. It's a constant battle. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of Republicans in D.C. who have a backbone. And so I tend to be getting into a lot of these fights solo, but it's fun doing it.
What was it like being a law clerk?
For Gorsuch, it was terrible because he had to deal with me for so long, but it was a great experience. I actually learned a lot as a lawyer. As an appellate law clerk, you learn how to think like a judge, and as an appellate law clerk, you learn how to think big picture and then be able to zoom in and focus on the minutia. So it's a really, really good experience. There's a reason that law firms pay these clerks, $400,000 for Supreme Court clerks for their bonus, and I think it's $200,000 for the appellate clerks because they add so much value to the law firm. I didn't cash in. I ended up going to the Senate Judiciary Committee instead and starting these groups. But it's a very good experience. Gorsuch is one of my Justice Gorsuch. I forget to say that he's one of my good friends. He's been one of my good friends for almost 2 decades, and so it was fun to help him get set up both times and get off to the races.
Mike, did you just say the clerks get paid upwards of $400,000 a year?
They get a $400,000. This is crazy. The Supreme Court law clerks get a $400,000 signing bonus from law firms, in addition to their salary, in addition to their end-of-year bonus. So these young law clerks. I wasn't young. I was old like the rest of my co-clerks, but these young law clerks, 27, 28 years old, are going and making $1 million a year their first year out of their clerkship.
Okay, so that I see. Now that makes total sense. Do they get promised this bonus in advance in order to be enticed after they do their clerkship? And if so, is there not a little bit of politics or corruption that could breed while they are clerking?
So it's up to each justice, but like, for example, Justice Gorsuch would not let us talk to law firms until a certain point in the term when the cases were done. And then if you're talking to law firm, because it creates recusal issues, which you just discussed, and so you have to be very careful about that. But it's those clerks are, present company excluded. These Supreme Court clerks are truly the best of the best. They are the top of their class, the top law schools, and they also have remarkable backgrounds in addition to that. So they are certainly the cream of the crop, and they're worth every penny. It's a lot of money, but they add a lot of value to law firms.
And how much do you think the ideology of what shaped law schools in the past several decades is the core issue for those of us that see courts sort of going AWOL on a wide range of issues, from constitutional precedent, sometimes not even caring about the public policy impact, it seems, in aspects of the Trump case? That seems to be the case. What you're describing is that's not a reflection of a lack of intellectual capacity, but it may be a reflection of ideological indoctrination that's contra our constitutional history.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Marxist left have taken over every institution in America. It used to be that, it was just academia. Now they've taken over the military, right? And so it's just, they're subversive, they're insidious. They've taken over they're taking over corporations, big tech, other corporations. They've taken over the entire country, right? And I guess I think the only industry they haven't taken over yet is probably big oil, but that's coming next. So yeah, I mean, law firms the law schools are liberal. I don't think law students are liberal. I think the conservative or moderate independent ones just keep their mouth shut because they don't want to deal with the harassment and the cancellation from their woke cupcake classmates. But it's certainly, I remember I was at the University of Iowa. This was 20 years ago, and it was a contracts class, and they were this whack job professor was teaching critical race theory 20 years ago in contracts. And I'm thinking, what the hell does this have to do with contracts other than the Marxist left trying to destroy contracts and destroy our country?
Now, so you mentioned you're still in private practice, and you're working with the Article 3 project. I guess briefly explain what that is, because that's going to weave in and out of the conversation tonight. What's the Article 3 project concretely? What does it do in reality? And then I'll put the links later for people to support it. But what is it? How did it get started? What are you doing with it?
It is a 501c4. It's a nonprofit organization. It's a political advocacy organization. And so during the Trump years, I ran the Senate Judiciary Committee nomination team. I was the chief counsel for nominations for 2 years, the first 2 years of the Trump first term. And then the second 2 years, I started the Article 3 project to fight for the confirmation of Trump's judges from the outside, defend these judges, defend the rule of law, punch back against the left. And now it's to defend constitutionalist judges, defend the rule of law. And, we're not mindlessly opposing every one of Biden's nominees just because I think that's a stupid strategy. But the ones that are particularly bad, we come out hard against them, like Ketanji Brown Jackson. So it's our side, the Republican side, the conservative side is they're stuck they're stuck in a bygone era, and they don't want to fight. And at the Article 3 project, as I told the New York Times when we launched this thing 3.5 years ago, Carl Holtz almost fell out of his chair. I said, I'm taking off the gloves, I'm putting on the brass knuckles, and I'm breaking the left's glass jaws. And so that's what we're doing. I like to give the left a healthy dose of their own medicine. So I'm tired of conservatives who like to lose, gallantly. I want to win, and I want to break their nose doing.
What do you attribute that to? Is it the Iowa upbringing? In other words, the background. What is it that like a lot of younger, sharper conservatives, constitutionalists, others recognize the need to? We had Rich Dad Poor Dad on. He was making the exact same point that it's time not to try to play by Marcus of Queensberry rules when you're in a gutter fight. What do you attribute that to in your upbringing? That mindset.
I think it was growing up with red hair. You learn how to have very thick skin. I was actually raised by Democrats. My parents were like crazy leftists, but I was a Republican. I was a conservative before I even knew what that meant. My parents were like these bleeding heart liberals. My mom campaigned for Jesse Jackson in 1988 because she thought Michael Dukakis was too conservative. I mean, I was raised by lunatic, left-wing, bleeding heart Catholic types, and I saw. My parents worked like in Des Moines, Iowa. There was one school where it was majority minority. Both my parents worked at that school. My dad was a public school teacher. My mom was an associate who made sure that kids were getting to class on time and doing the discipline. Right. So that's how I was raised, and I saw at a very young age how these liberal programs, these handouts that were supposed to be helping poor, oftentimes Black kids, trap them in intergenerational poverty. And I'm like, this is wrong. This is terrible what they're doing. And but the left, and as I got older, I saw it was intentional. They're doing this on purpose. They want class conflict. They want race conflict. They're doing this is not every Democrat, not every liberal is doing this on purpose, but there's the leftist and the leftist part of the Democrat Party who they are absolutely trapping people in poverty and creating this conflict on purpose. I always say today's Democrat Party is not our parents' or our grandparents' Democrat Party. These are not liberals who love America and just disagree with conservatives on the best way to get there. These are leftists. They hate America. They're trying to divide and destroy America so they can recreate it in their Marxist utopian society. You know, we've seen that playbook for 100 years where 100 million people have been killed around the world under this Marxist ideology. And I see with Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the 15 pronouns, the gender chaos, the racial chaos, the COVID chaos, the chaos that we've seen over the last 2.5 years with BLM, with COVID. It's the Marxist left has really they're not even trying to hide their ugly faces anymore. They're just out there, right? And so it's important that we punch back, we fight back. We're not cowards, because we're going to lose our country if we don't.
I want to get back to this. And when you punch back, do they not punch back as well? But before we even get there, concrete example, Ketanji Jackson Brown, KBJ or KJB? KBJ, Ketanji
Brown Jackson.
Brown Jackson.
Yeah.
Concretely, I want to understand, like, when you want to oppose a nominee, what did you practically do to oppose KBJ?
So what I did was I dug into her judicial record, going back, her legal record, going back 25 years to Harvard Law School, where we saw that she had this disqualified, look, she has great credentials, right? She went to Harvard Law School. She clerked on the Supreme Court. She was a federal public defender. She was a district court judge. She's clearly qualified on paper to be elevated to the DC circuit. I don't know if she was ready quite yet to go to the Supreme Court, but whatever, right? If she would have been there for another year or two, certainly she was ready to go to the Supreme Court, but she's a plausible candidate on paper. So I never said that she wasn't qualified for the job. I said that her record disqualified her for the job, because as the Article 3 project dug into her judicial record, we pulled up her law review articles. We pulled her district court decisions. We read her record. And what we saw with her record is she has this disqualifying pattern of extreme leniency to sex offenders of kids. And it was every instance where eight out of 8 times, every instance where she had discretion to sentence these people who traffic these child rape videos, trade it for pleasure, and you create this industry where kids get kidnapped and raped. Every single time, 8 out of 8 times, she gave rock bottom leniency. Right. And we looked, and then we pulled her law review notes from law school, where she argued that these people who traffic in this garbage, this child pornography, child sex and torture videos, they're not pedophiles. She argues this. She argues that they're not pedophiles, and she did this on the Sentencing Commission as well. She single-handedly was the Trojan horse on the Sentencing Commission to get the Sentencing Commission to try to recommend more lenient sentences for people who traffic in child pornography. And she has this theory that if they're looking at child pornography, they're not pedophiles, therefore they're not dangerous to the community, and therefore we're locking them up for too long. And that was contradicted by the witnesses who came before her at the Sentencing Commission, who, when she raised that theory on the Sentencing Commission, they said, no, that's not true. They're actually pedophiles. They're actually dangerous. And she ignored that and made it a key finding of the U.S. Sentencing Commission. She made it sentencing policy, right? So we pointed out her disqualifying record. We didn't attack her. We didn't, say that she was not qualified. We said she was disqualified. I didn't do anything personal attacks. People were saying, "Oh, you're criticizing Ketanji Brown Jackson. You're a racist and a sexist." And I'm just tired of that, right? You have to be able to look at someone's record. If you're going to nominate her because she's a black woman, and that's what Biden said, he was only going to nominate a black woman. He nominated a black woman for this job. You can't just say, "Okay, he nominated a black woman. We can't dig into her record, because if we dig into her record, they're going to say we're racist and sexist." I just don't give a damn if they do that.
In terms of the Trump raid, I have been surprised. Like, I thought to at least some degree the Justice Department, while it was weaponizing everything legally, would show some restraint when it comes to a former president, the lead opponent of the incumbent rivalry party, particularly when they're breaching all precedent to do so.
Yeah.
I mean, Bill Clinton, of course, famously kept records in his sock drawer. George W. Bush had them in a separate place. Barack Obama famously kept admittedly classified records at an abandoned furniture warehouse. And now all of a sudden, the president keeps a pretty limited subset of records by presidential history. And they're records that he can declare as presidential. That's the whole point of the law. There's no criminal enforcement statute in the Presidential Records Act. That was deliberate and intentional. This was meant to apply to people other than the president, frankly. It's what it's really there for. It's a record-keeping mechanism for records that the archive should have that are not the president's records that he's decided to keep as his own. Can you give people, like, there's been so much misinformation out there from the mainstream legal analysis about this, acting like it's somehow unparalleled, it's unprecedented, that it's clearly illegal, that it's a crime, when I see no evidence of any of that.
Yeah, so this unprecedented, unnecessary, unlawful home raid on President Trump was complete political garbage. It was, so as you said, first of all, let's step back. The president, as the commander-in-chief, has the absolute constitutional power to declassify anything he wants in any manner he wants for any reason he wants, and he doesn't have to get permission from any bureaucrat who works for him to do that. And that is confirmed by a 1988 Supreme Court case, Department of the Navy versus Egan. Separate from that, there is the Presidential Records Act. The president has the absolute statutory power under the Presidential Records Act to take his records when he leaves office. And it is his sole determination whether he can take these records and make them his personal records that belong to him or presidential records that go to the archives. The bureaucrats and the librarians categorize it, and then it gets sent back to him to put into his library. That's the Presidential Records Act. Before Nixon, presidential records, that means anything written or received by the president or his staff, those are presidential records, were personal property of the president. That changed with Nixon, with the Presidential Records Act. And what they did was, it like you said, there's no criminal component to it. It is meant for the president. It's meant for the staff, like you said, and it's the president's sole determination. So, on this, that we talked about that 2012 Clinton sock drawer case. So, Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch sued President Clinton because he had 79 audio tapes, 8 years of his presidency, where he had in his sock drawer, and these were highly classified conversations. Conversations that Clinton had with foreign leaders, his Secretary of State, his top aides. These clearly classified. These are born classified. It doesn't matter whether they're marked classified or not. They're clearly classified. So Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch sue. This Obama judge in 2012 correctly holds that under the Presidential Records Act, it is the president's sole determination whether records are personal records or presidential records. Presidential records include classified records and non-classified records. So this idea that, oh God, he had classified records, of course the presidential records include presidential records. They're going to include the most classified records that we have because it's the freaking president, right? So he had these. So Clinton had these records. He had these audio tapes. The fact that he did not turn them over to the archives when he left office made them personal records under the Presidential Records Act, and it didn't matter whether it contained classified materials or not. So remember, former presidents get Office of the Former President funded by Congress. They get staff. The staff gets security clearances. The former president has a security clearance. The office space has secure office space called SCIFs. They have Secret Service protection, right? If we trusted this president to have these classified records for 48 years as president, why the hell would we not trust him as a former president? Do we think he's going to become like some Russian mole or Chinese mole after he leaves office and sell these things? It's just nonsense. So when the president received classified records as president, including from the CIA or any other intel agency, they become presidential records. And so he's allowed to take them when he leaves office. And then the Espionage Act. So if you saw with the Garland, they used the Espionage Act, the Federal Records Act, which is completely different from the Presidential Records Act, and then obstruction of justice as their predicate potential crimes to go get this bogus home raid general warrant, illegal and unconstitutional general warrant from Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart, who just recused from President Trump's civil lawsuit versus Hillary Clinton on Russian collusion on June 22nd. Somehow his clear judicial bias, where he had a 2017 Facebook post trashing President Trump, somehow that judicial bias magically disappeared. 6 weeks later, the Biden Justice Department they go down to him and they ask for this general warrants. And they went in and did this unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful home raid of President Trump. Again, the Presidential Records Act doesn't have a criminal component. And they went under the Espionage Act, which would not apply here because the president declassified these records. And even if he didn't declassify them, he has the right to have them under the Presidential Records Act. They do this home raid. They go through Melania's underwear drawer. They go through Barron, their 16-year-old son's room, and they take 11,000 records. So if you've taken 11,000 records, you know damn well it was an illegal raid of a home.
I mean, two questions. I thought the Melania's underwear drawer was a joke, meme at first. Did they go there because they knew that Bill Clinton hid documents in his sock drawer, so they figured they'd go to Melania's drawer? Or are they looking for potentially other stuff to embarrass or blackmail Melania and Trump's kid?
That's a very good question. I mean, what are they looking in a 16-year-old kid's bedroom for? I mean, it's ridiculous. If you look at the inventory from the raid that the Justice Department produced, look at number one. Number one was the Roger Stone pardon document. Why would they make that number one on their inventory raid unless it was a giant FU from the FBI and the Justice Department, Biden Justice Department, to Trump for pardoning Roger Stone? Number two, and I don't know this for sure, but I presume number two, and this is the reason for the raid, number two talks about leather-bound documents, and it had SCI documents on there. I don't know this for certain, but I can almost certainly guarantee you, based upon leaks from the Biden Justice Department to Newsweek, to Bill Orkin at Newsweek, where they said that the point of this raid was to go get Trump's declassified Russian collusion documents. Trump declassified these on January 19th, 2021 with a presidential memo. The FBI, the intel community, convinced the outgoing White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, that there could be Privacy Act violations if they released these documents. So Mark Meadows, on January 20th, the day they left office, issued this memo saying, okay, do your Privacy Act review and then get these out as quickly as possible. Well, the Biden administration never did that, so they kept those documents. I am pretty confident that was the reason for the raid, because that's what they leaked to Bill Orkin at Newsweek. I think it was on November 18th or October 18th. That's what I think they leaked, and I'm just trying to go off memory. So they went and got these Russian collusion documents. And the reason they did is because these documents, if you look at news sources, are so damning, because it shows that Obama, Biden, Hillary, the FBI, the intel community colluded and made up Russian collusion allegations against Trump to influence the 2016 election and to continue to go after him after he won the presidency. That's what this is all about. Everything else is smoke and noise and BS. They can pretend like, oh, it was so bad that Trump had these documents. It was such a danger to our national security. Remember, Office of Former President, federally funded staff, security clearances, SCIF, Secret Service protection. These documents did not leak from President Trump for 18 months. The only time they started leaking is when the Biden Justice Department raided them and got them back from President Trump. That's when they started leaking.
Is there any chance the Supreme Court takes up the case? I thought they made good arguments about the technical nature of whether or not there was even appellate jurisdiction for what the 11th Circuit did on the issue of the special master's authority to review classified documents labeled and marked classified. Do you think there's a chance that they will take it up?
So there's an emergency appeal right now before the Supreme Court. Candidly, I'd be very surprised if the Supreme Court does anything with that, because it's a bad vehicle, bad time. What I think is going to happen is this will get resolved by the Supreme Court in one of two ways. When President Trump, once the special master does the review of the records that were the 11,000 records that were seized from Mar-a-Lago, the Biden Justice Department was able to dupe the 11th Circuit into thinking that the documents, the 100 documents marked classified, should not have been in Trump's possession. They did this on an emergency appeal to the 11th Circuit. Three judges got duped there. The Biden Justice Department did not properly brief the Presidential Records Act, including the fact that the Presidential Records Act does not distinguish between documents marked classified and other documents. And so they duped the 11th Circuit into thinking there was some urgency that Trump can't have these records, that the special master can't review these records because it's, these are the highest classified records in our arsenal, and we can't let them have them. It's just complete nonsense. Three doofus judges, including two Trump-appointed doofus judges on the 11th Circuit, bought that. And the Biden Justice Department, they misrepresented the Presidential Records Act. That being said, this will get resolved by the Supreme Court in one of two ways. There is a Rule 41G motion under the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure where Trump can file down with Judge Cannon in the Southern District of Florida. It's basically, this was an illegal raid. Give me back all the 11,000 of my documents. And that needs to come. Trump needs to file that Rule 41G amendment motion, Rule 41G. Give me back my records. This raid violated the Fourth Amendment. It was an unreasonable search and seizure. It was a general warrant from a biased judge. And I had the absolute right to these records under the Presidential Records Act, whether they're classified or not, right?
That's what Mike Lindell is doing with his FBI raid, right?
Yes.
In the proceedings he filed? Okay.
Now, I haven't followed that as closely as I should, but I'm almost certain there was a Rule 41G there, right? So that's
Okay.
when you get back your records after an illegal raid. So that would go through the civil process, Southern District of Florida, 11th Circuit, Supreme Court. I think that's what Trump needs to do, is move on that, right? And I think they're waiting for the special master to finish their review before they do that. But move fast forward on that, get that resolved through the Rule 41G. The alternative way to get this resolved through by the Supreme Court is Biden stupidly indicts Trump in D.C. Some uniparty judge in D.C. doesn't throw out the indictment because the Presidential Records Act is controlling here, not the Federal Records Act. You can't commit espionage as the president. It's constitutionally, it's legally impossible for the president to violate the Espionage Act because he's the president. He can declassify anything he wants. It's the Presidential Records Act that applies, not the Federal Records Act. And it is legally impossible, according to a recent OLC memo, Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel memo. You cannot, it is almost impossible for someone to obstruct investigations into non-crimes, right? If there's not a crime that the Justice Department is investigating, you can't obstruct the investigations into those non-crimes, right? So that's the legal issue that would get a DC uniparty judge there would be a motion to dismiss the indictment. That uniparty judge would deny it. The Obama stacked DC circuit would probably rule against Trump, and so then it would have to get resolved by the Supreme Court through the criminal route. It will get resolved by the Supreme Court one way or the other, and I am very confident the Supreme Court will rule in Trump's favor because it is crystal clear under the Presidential Records Act, under Department of Navy versus Egan, under the Clinton sock torture case, that Trump did not do anything wrong as a matter of law for how he took and kept his records in Mar-A-Lago. Remember, this was when he was president of the United States, he used Mar-a-Lago as his office. It is very secure.
And have you been surprised at I've dealt with the Justice Department for 20 years. There's always been politics involved, but not to the degree of overt partisan politicization. And that you combine that with what we're seeing in the District of Columbia. I've compared it to your Martin Luther King, your civil rights movement in the 1950s South. You're not getting an impartial judge. You're not getting an impartial jury pool. That's we've seen in the Roger Stone case, Steve Bannon case, the General Flynn case. We're seeing it in a lot of the January 6th cases. That what looks like justice, American justice, does not look like what we're seeing in the District of Columbia or what we're seeing right now from the Justice Department, even going around arresting pro-life protesters and raiding their houses from Pennsylvania to Tennessee. How dangerous is this that there's been two things, this overt, open, partisan politicization of our criminal justice process from the seventh floor of the FBI over to the hierarchy at the Justice Department. Came out, they offered $1 million to Christopher Steele to give dirt about Trump in 2016. And how problematic is it that we have this situation? I call it the swamp getting to judge the swamp, and the swamp getting to judge the critics of the swamp. DC is a congressionally created federal district. How much of that is an ongoing issue as well, what risk it poses, and what remedies might exist?
Yeah, and this is very important. This is where Attorney General Merrick Garland has frankly stunned me, because I thought, I kind of felt, I didn't feel bad, but I thought, okay, my boss took his seat on the Supreme Court. Thank God for our country that Gorsuch is there and not Garland. But I thought that, Garland would just be some liberal DC Circuit Court judge. Yeah, he'd be a liberal, but not, not an activist, kind of harmless. I actually thought he was a pretty good pick. for Biden for Attorney General because he's this respected liberal judge from D.C. He worked in the Justice Department, the Clinton Justice Department as a top official. He oversaw some key cases, I think Oklahoma City Unabomber cases. So he was very well respected. He was on the D.C. circuit. I think it was 14 years, something like that. And then he gets there, and it's been so politicized and weaponized since he got there. And the good sign is that he picked Vanita Gupta as his associate attorney general, the number 3, and Kristen Clark as his head of the Civil Rights Division. And these are 2 left-wing radical activists who I had to deal with on a regular basis, fight with on a regular basis when I ran the Senate Judiciary Committee's confirmation process for then Chairman Chuck Grassley. I mean, these are hardcore, as radical as you can get. And I'm thinking of Garland. I said, is Garland picking these people, or are they being shoved down Garland's throat by the Biden White House? And he was picking them. So I'm thinking, okay, this is a very bad sign that Merrick. Thank God Molly Hemingway bit my head off and smacked me, because I actually even contemplated endorsing Garland's for AG. And I thought, okay, the president gets to pick whoever he wants. Let's, the Garland, my boss, took his seat on the Supreme Court. Maybe I'll be magnanimous for my boss Gorsuch and do my boss a favor by endorsing him. Thank God I didn't, because the guy is, and yeah, I see your face, and I don't blame you. That's
well, no, but you raised the question: is Garland picking them, or are they being jammed down his throat because he's just a passive individual now who holds a grudge against those who denied him his seat on the SCOTUS, and he's an old, tired man and is just going to be a pushover for the powers that be? Watching from the outside, I'm not convinced the people who are at the heads of the government are controlling anything. It does seem like things are being thrust on them, and they are figureheads and easy pushover.
No, not with Garland. I've heard this. Garland is very much micromanaging the Justice Department. He works late into the evening, and he micromanages that place. So this is on Garland. He's not some old washed up judge who's the figurehead. He is absolutely micromanaging this. And think about what they've done here. You talked about they're sending FBI teams to go after the FBI squads to go to the homes of pro-life protesters who are allegedly violating the FACE Act, which is protesting at abortion clinics, sending in FBI teams to do this while they're giving amnesty to the pro-abortion radicals who are terrorizing Catholic churches, crisis pregnancy centers, which is also part of the FACE Act is what I think it's called. You have these same people who are these abortion activists who are terrorizing Supreme Court justices and their families outside of their homes, which is obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. 1507. You do not have a First Amendment right to obstruct justice by harassing and intimidating federal judges outside of their home. We saw the deadly consequences when you dox federal judges. Judge Esther Salas, an Obama-appointed judge in New Jersey, had her 20-year-old son, Daniel, murdered, and her husband, Mark, seriously wounded because some deranged lunatic doxed her and showed up to her house. It is very dangerous when they're doing this. We saw this with Justice Kavanaugh, his wife Ashley, and their 2 teenage daughters facing a 1 a.m. assassination attempt. Even after that assassination attempt, Merrick Garland is still allowing these protests to happen outside of these Supreme Court justices' homes, saying they have a First Amendment right to be there. Well, why do they have a First Amendment right to harass and intimidate Supreme Court justices, which they don't? But these pro-life Christians somehow don't have a First Amendment right to be outside of abortion clinics praying, right? So it's just completely weaponized. You saw that he sent 15 FBI agents to go investigate Bubba Wallace's noose and sick the FBI after parents protesting at Loudoun County public school board meetings, but gives amnesty to he gives amnesty to these left-wing lunatics who are harassing and intimidating Supreme Court justices. I mean, there's a whole list here I'm looking at. You send the full force of the FBI to go after every grandma and goofball who trespassed and paraded on January 6th. Yet they are hunting down. They've given amnesty. They've dropped the cases. The Trump Justice Department the cases against BLM and Antifa rioters who caused billions in damage, destroyed American cities, attacked police, attacked the Portland federal courthouse on a nightly basis for months, killed dozens, caused billions of damage. It's crazy. We saw this. I could just go down the whole list here. That with the National Archives, they've sent a 30-person hit squad to go get Trump's documents, but yet they had the Clinton software case. We had Obama records in a bowling alley or in Hoffman Estates in a warehouse. It's just crazy how they have weaponized the Justice Department so fast over the last 18 months. And this is squarely on Biden, squarely on Merrick Garland. The FBI director, Chris Wray, is a total coward. He lets the FBI run him. He's in over his head. And it's, Lisa Monaco, the deputy attorney general, the associate attorney general, Vanita Gupta, Kristen Clark, the civil rights head. These are bad people. And they need to, when Republicans take over the House and hopefully the Senate in November, they need to impeach these people for what they've done, how they've destroyed the rule of law in this country by weaponizing and politicizing the Justice Department.
And I have an idea on the DC side. I just wanted to float it by you. So Congress creates the District of Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Congress can uncreate the District of
Yes,
Columbia.
they can.
And it seems to me that that's something that needs to be on the legislative agenda, because
Yes.
we've seen, like if we said, hey, why don't we try all the Democrats in a small rural East Texas county that votes 94% Republican, there would be outrage all over the place. But that's what's happening to everybody, that the swamp gets to not only judge itself, but judge its critics with its own jury pool made up of a bunch of government lefty bureaucrats. And we've seen, they couldn't even get convictions for the Antifa rioters. Those are rioters that did real damage throughout the city from the Trump inauguration.
Yeah.
That there were grand juries would issue no bills, juries would quit in cases. We saw it in the lawyer case, the corrupt lawyer, Clinton lawyer case. He was dead to rights, clearly lied. And yet that jury acquitted him. Why? Because they weren't going to acquit somebody who's on their political side. What do you think about the idea of not having a federal District of Columbia separate court system?
I agree. I 100% agree. It's all these uniparty judges. It's 95% Democrat jury pool and 5% Trump deranged rhinos, right? Why the hell do we want our country's most pressing decisions decided by these nut jobs inside the District of Columbia? Hell no. I actually would take it even a step farther than that. I think Congress should repeal. So under our Constitution, DC is a federal enclave. They need to repeal the DC Home Rule Act of 1973. We need to have Congress run DC again instead of these woke idiots like Muriel Bowser, who went to war against the police and went woke. And then I've had 3 drive-by shootings on my street corner over the last year and a half since BLM, made their presence known in DC. The police can't do their jobs. It's a mess. There's crime. There's homeless camps everywhere. There's garbage everywhere. Businesses shut down under these crazy COVID restrictions. BLM and Antifa they've destroyed this city. This is the nation's capital. It should be the best city on the planet, and it looks like a third world Marxist hellhole right now. So Congress needs to grow some backbone. I always say that the DC politicians are the only reptiles on the planet who lack a backbone. So they need to find their backbone when instead of just tweeting and giving tough talks, they actually need to legislate. They need to earn power and use power and take away DC's home rule. And in the interim, have the police force report to a committee appointed by the president and Congress, right? Because we just cannot have law enforcement. We cannot have police reporting to these woke idiots like Muriel Bowser.
Could you explain to the Schnook, why was the District of DC created in the first place?
It was created under our Constitution. Our first nation, the first capital, where was it? It started I might be getting this backwards. Was it New York, then Philadelphia, then the third place was DC? And I think I'd have to go back and look at this. I think it was because it was closer to where George Washington was down at Mount Vernon, right? So they had to create this 10-mile by 10-mile federal enclave that on the Potomac between Maryland and Virginia. Actually, Arlington and Alexandria, Virginia, used to be part of DC, and Congress broke them off. And part of my power grab here, when we repeal the DC Home Rule Act of 1973, I think we need to retrocede Arlington and Alexandria back into the District of Columbia, so we could have Washington District of Columbia, Alexandria District of Columbia, Arlington District of Columbia, and then take away their right to elect senators and representatives, and we'll turn Virginia red permanently, and we'll disenfranchise all these government workers who live in the DC area, right? And we'll make them part of the District of Columbia.
Someone had asked in the chat, when you punch, do they punch back? Now, to the extent you say you're actively representing Trump, I'm going to ask the obvious question. Have you had people file ethics complaints, go after you quite personally for your conduct as a professional?
I am not. So I'm not representing Trump. I am doing this through the Article 3 project. I'm not Trump's lawyer. I'm a Trump fan. I'm happy to punch. And frankly, I don't care if they punch at me, right? So I've been doing this for, reporters, left-wing activists, they'll come after me. And then you look what happens. So then I punch back even harder. Like Ruth Marcus from the Washington Post did a whole opinion piece bashing me. And so I just made her life living hell until she cried uncle and called me and told me to stop. So these reporters, these left-wing activists, they know if they mess with me, I'm going to come back at them. I always say I compare myself to a homeless man with a knife, right? You might be able to beat me up, but you're going to get cut. And is it worth it?
Exactly. Now, what are some of the other big legislative items that you're hopeful that if Republicans take back the House and the Senate? Now, with Biden there, might be blocked, but part of a legislative agenda, if, say, Trump is back or someone or DeSantis, whomever in 2025, what are some of the key legislative reforms we need to do to institutionalize in order to reduce the risk of this happening again?
So there are a lot of things that need to happen, and it needs to be that power. We have concentrated power in this country. It's concentrated in government in DC. It's concentrated in corporations. Particularly, it's concentrated in big tech. I'm running, in addition to the Article 3 project, I'm running the Internet Accountability Project to take on big tech. There is a rare bipartisan closing window of opportunity between the populist left and the Trump right to take on big tech right now with antitrust. And so Congressman Ken Buck, Republican all-star from Colorado, my former boss Chuck Grassley from Iowa, Tom Cotton, Mike Lee are working with a bipartisan coalition to get key bipartisan big tech antitrust reforms done this year in the lame duck session, and they need to get done. And look, I disagree with Biden on everything. I think he's an incompetent, demented, bad person. He's a terrible president, and our country's suffering for it. The only thing that he's doing right is he's good on big tech antitrust, and he's appointed two people, Lena Khan at the FTC and Jonathan Cantor at the Justice Department's Antitrust Division, who share my view that big tech has too much power. They violate the Sherman Act, they violate the Clayton Act, but we have this thing called the Consumer Welfare Standard that conservatives made up at the Chicago School 40 years ago. Bork, Scalia, my judicial heroes on a lot of things, they're just wrong on antitrust. And this Consumer Welfare Standard makes it where big tech has antitrust amnesty. Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple have antitrust amnesty. They have too much market power. They're monopolies. They use their power to crush competition, shutter small businesses, cancel conservatives. We need to fix this legislatively to give the FTC, Justice Department, state attorneys general, and private litigants the power to finally take apart, to dismantle, break up big tech. And I'll give you a quick example. People said, if you don't like Twitter, build your own. Okay, well, Parler did that. They quickly got a $1.3 billion valuation. And so what happens? Parler got blamed for January 6th, even though January 6th protests were organized on Facebook. Google and Apple kicked Parler out of the App Store duopoly, and Amazon kicked Parler off the internet and crushed it. Parler filed a lawsuit. One of its claims was antitrust. It got kicked because of the Consumer Welfare Standard, right? Because under the Consumer Welfare Standard, they just look at price. And when you're looking at big tech, things are supposedly free Gmail, free Google Maps, free Facebook, free Twitter, free. It's not free. They're making trillions of dollars by surveilling us, gathering as much information as they can about us and selling us to advertisers and making trillions of dollars off of this. But because we don't pay for these services, the Consumer Welfare Standard basically says we don't have antitrust claims. And so that's why we need to fix this legislatively, and we can get this done now. Jim Jordan opposes these things. I've been going to war with Jim Jordan about this. He's wrong. He's carrying Google's water. He must be called out. He must be stopped.
Why does Jim Jordan substantively disagree with it?
Substantively, he said, well, that's a good question. I've been doing Internet Accountability Project now for almost 3 years. when we first started this thing, Jim Jordan said, censorship, the way we fix censorship is through the free market, right? Through, we can't do 230 reform because we just need to let the free market fix it, right? So then we saw what happened with Parliament, right? So then we said, okay, there is no free market. A free market requires a functioning market. And when big trillion-dollar big tech monopolists are using their market power to crush competition, we no longer have a free market. This is why we have antitrust laws, is to protect the free market. It is a targeted law enforcement measure to kill the anti-competitive tumors on the free market, so we don't need industry-wide regulations. Facebook's calling for regulations because they can afford them. It's an entry barrier for startup competitors, right? So Jim Jordan, we said, okay, your free market solution didn't work. See Parler. Now let's do the antitrust. And now he's saying, oh, we can't do antitrust. We need to do Section 230. The problem with Jim Jordan is he takes too much of big tech's money and the Koch network's money. There's the George Mason University, Mercatus, that whole world. His staffers come from that world. They take Google-funded trips around the world. It's a revolving door between Jim Jordan's office and that Google Koch world. And that's why they're doing this. They gaslight. It's not that he just opposes these bills and he's not on. Look, if he's Darrell Issa from California just comes out and straight up says, I'm not supporting these bills because I like big tech. They're my constituents. Great. That makes sense. Jim Jordan comes out and says he's going to fight big tech. He's going to crush them. And then behind the scenes, he does their bidding, and makes it even worse is he knifes the people like Ken Buck, Senator Grassley, my former boss, Tom Cotton, Mike Lee. He knifes them in the process. And so ask him, have him come on your podcasting and ask him why he's doing Google's bidding.
What do you think the chances are of improved Republican leadership? Like some of these issues were there early on in the Trump administration. Some of us were talking about it, but ran into a lot of hurdles. Whether it was Jim Jordan on a big tech or McConnell on something else or Paul Ryan on something else, that a lot of the sort of populist build-up Trump base wanted to see action then on big tech and other things that didn't happen. And some are still concerned. They're like, okay, we're going to work hard, get Republicans elected. What's the chances that we get better leadership going forward to be able to implement the things that people really care about?
I think it is critical that we pass as many of these bills as we can be in the lame duck session at the end of this year, because I don't think that Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan are going to bring bills that do anything for big tech. There's not the support right now to do Section 230 reform. There is political support right now to get these antitrust bills passed that would finally start to break up Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple's gatekeeping power over information and commerce in this country. And these are critically important bills, and we can stop them. We can get these done right now. Like one of these bills, S2992, the non-discrimination bill, would be a rifle shot into big tech. It would cause a lot of damage. And I'll tell you, just so you understand how much of a rifle shot this would be, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple have spent $200 million this year opposing S2992 alone.
What does that mean? They've spent $200 million. What does that look like for people who don't know?
They spend money on TV ads to attack these bills and say that we're going to take away Amazon Prime and we're going to break the internet and all that nonsense that they do. It's nonsense, but they have very deep pockets. They've spent $200 million just on one bill alone. That's how effective we've been at the Article 3 project and the Internet Accountability Project to make these front and center issues. Look, we were the first group on the right to take on big tech with the Internet Accountability Project. And in 3 short years, we have gone a long way in changing the dialogue. Big tech has done a lot of it to themselves by canceling conservatives, censoring, being too woke, going after deplatforming Trump and Rand Paul and the COVID censorship, and now they're debanking people. They've gone too far, right? And so they have too much power. They cannot be trusted with this power. Concentrated power in America, whether it's in government or corporations, is dangerous. And that's where the new Republican movement needs to get around this concept. Look, I'm not saying big is bad, but when you are a monopoly, When you're using your market power to crush competition, you are a cancerous tumor on the free market and you need to be eradicated. Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple need to be broken up. If Google competed against YouTube instead of acquired YouTube, there is no chance they would be censoring Rand Paul and these other top COVID doctors on this COVID stuff.
And speaking of sort of the last substantive policy question that you just mentioned before we break up, I'm concerned about what's happening in the financial services realm. So I represent a client, very successful, did a lot of great business projects, mostly helping refurbish properties that would benefit inner city neighborhoods. Because he was a Trump supporter, he got targeted by a major, one of the top 5 financial institutions in America, by a major hotel franchise, and by a range of others. And they were trying to take him out. And then we're seeing this on smaller scale. Saw it with PayPal, where they floated that trial balloon before it got shot down. And they lost a little cash in the market, thankfully. But that the next risk is financial services weaponizing politics for the purposes of taking out conservative causes or conservatives, period. What could be done legislatively on that side of the aisle?
Well, and that's already happening. We just saw this with PayPal, where they said that they're going to fine people $2,500 for, misinformation and disinformation, and there was a huge backlash. But what needs to happen is that Republicans say, "Oh, we don't want to use government power." Nonsense. We need to earn power. We need to use power, like the left does. And this is not the quaint old Democrat Party of our parents and grandparents. This is the Marxist left. They're trying to destroy us. They're trying to cancel us from the public square. They're trying to debank us. We need to fight back. And if Republicans are not willing to do that, we need to primary them and beat them.
I know you got to catch a plane. Where can people support the work that you're doing and follow the stuff that you do?
I really appreciate you having me on. It's article3project.org, article number 3project.org. And then I'm on Twitter, Getter, Truth. When I'm not kicked off of Twitter 5 times, it's my personal is MRD DMIA, MRD DMIA. That's Michael R. Davis, Des Moines, Iowa, where I'm from. And then it's at article 3 project, at article number 3 project. And you can learn about the Internet Accountability Project. If you go on there, click on War Room, and that will take you to the Internet Accountability Project, where we talk about these legislative fights that we're having this year to finally rein in big tech. It's time for Republicans to put up or shut up.
Mike, email me all of those links and I'll put them in the pinned comment. And if we've got 120 seconds left, I one question I need to ask.
Sure.
You were involved in the Kavanaugh hearings?
I was the Senate staff leader for then Chairman Chuck Grassley.
What was that like on the inside to see that level of treachery during the confirmation process?
It was utter chaos, and it was stunning to me how many Republicans were so weak during that process, even the ones we thought were so tough. And if it weren't for it, I know that people complain about Mitch McConnell a lot. I'll tell you, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Grassley, as the majority leader and the Senate Judiciary Chairman, were rock solid during that process. If they had wavered at all during that process, Kavanaugh would have went down. We would have lost. The Republicans would have lost the Senate. We would have lost the Supreme Court. We would have lost the country. And they did not waver. They were rock solid. McConnell may anger conservatives in a lot of ways, but he is rock solid on judges. And he was very good during that process.
Phenomenal. Robert, are we going to stick around and talk a few more minutes after this?
Just a few minutes.
Okay. Mike, thank you very much. Amazing stuff. Send me all your links. I'll put them in the pinned comment on YouTube and Rumble. And we'll make friends on Twitter now.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks, Mike.
Robert, hold on. I'm OCD. This has to be like this. And this has to be like this.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah. Robert. He's great. They're doing a lot of fantastic work. I was supposed to be on with Alex Jones here in a little bit. That's
well, you got to go do that and talk about the $1 billion verdict. Robert, people in the chat, let's end on that. Such an outlandish decision. It makes an appeal virtually guaranteed.
Obviously,
success on an appeal.
It increases the possibility that the U.S. Supreme Court takes the case. But because I don't have any confidence in the Connecticut court system. So as long as people continue to raise alarm about this in the court of public opinion, it increases the probability. The two big libel cases the U.S. Supreme Court took up were partially because of outrageous verdicts. $5 million verdict in the New York Times versus Sullivan, probably worth $50 million today.
And the
$77 million verdict in the Westboro Baptist case. Everybody who knows anything knew that those cases were about impermissible punishment of speech. That the families didn't suffer $1 billion in damages because of statements they didn't even hear, that weren't even about, didn't even name them. Right? I mean, it's the most outrageous, outlandish verdict in American civil justice history. Period. It makes it look bad. It makes plaintiffs' lawyers look bad. It makes the judicial systems in Connecticut and Texas and Austin look bad. It makes it look like a bad joke. This makes the McDonald's verdict, which actually had better grounds for it if you knew the whole facts of it, look like a pristine verdict of justice. That this is an utterly outrageous verdict that exposes what a mockery of a trial in civil justice this case became.
People are going to say it's not $1 billion verdict, Robert. There's 16 plaintiffs. One of them got 120 million. The other one got 50
They gave
million.
an FBI guy $90 million. Nobody died. He didn't suffer any physical harm related to him.
Robert,
$90 million.
Jones
Jones never even talked about him. He admitted he never saw Jones talk about him. $90 million. It's an outrage.
Well, I'll tell you what's getting very tiresome is arguing with people on Twitter. Oh, David A. French says defamation is not protected speech. It's like, David, trials typically are protected or guaranteed. You skip the part where they skip the trial. Oh, then everyone's like, well, he should have just complied with discovery. Well, obviously, whatever default he did comply with was not a big deal because they had all the evidence at trial, whether they got it sooner or later. And you go through these loops. It's insanity trying to have a sane discussion on Twitter.
Well, just the damages by itself. I mean, the damages by itself is nuts. That you think people can be sued for $1 billion for their speech. That's never happened in the history of the world. And if you think that, you're a nut. That it shouldn't have anything to do with the civil justice process.
All right, so you're going to be on Jones tonight?
Yes.
Is Ricade is going to be on as well?
Yes.
People, you know what to watch tonight if you're going to look for some entertainment. Robert,
Infowars.com or band.video.
I'm going to read a few of the chats after you go, Robert, and just hang around for a bit. But all right, go. See you soon. People, you may have seen it. Winston is on my lap. Winston. I am Winston Shittenhouse. Okay, he's been keeping me warm here. I'll read some of the chats that I didn't get to. Hold on. What's my problem? Okay, I can still see the chat on YouTube through. Whose money is it again? It's for those of you who don't know, the verdict came down today. The whoever was reading the verdict, I was listening to this with somebody who's apolitical, and they said, how is the person reading this without not laughing because it's not funny? How are they reading these quantums with a look of credulity on their face? 190 million for the FBI agent. Let's not look. This might be like the country is not dying, and this might be that little needle that pops the balloon of the insanity. And people are like, oh yeah, $1 billion. You think what you want about it, $1 billion after a default verdict. And so I'm getting into these exchanges on the Twitterverse. They seem good-natured, but then I realize I'm not dealing with good faith actors, where they say he had a trial. And I said, no, he didn't have a trial on the merits. They only had a trial on the quantum. It was a default verdict on the merits, not in front of a jury. The judge said, so much non-compliance with discovery, I grant verdict by default. They didn't even have to prove their case in front of a jury. So it's nuts. But let me read some of the super chats that I didn't. What about the abortion leak? That wasn't a super chat. That was just a regular comment. I wanted to ask him. Mike Davis talked about that in other interviews. The autistic tiger we met at the Project Veritas event. Tiger just freaked everyone out at New York City Comic-Con with his upside down drawings. And ABC is running his story nationwide tonight. Go Tiger. Fantastic stuff. This was also just a comment that I wanted to ask. I did not get to ask this one. Sorry about that. What do we got? Barry Britt, are you covering the Emergencies Act Commission? I'm going to be paying attention to it and maybe get the Emergencies Act Commission is what's going on in Canada starts very soon. I don't know exactly when it starts, investigating Justin Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act to determine whether or not it was a legitimate invocation of the nuclear weapon of legislation. I'll be following it. Oh, yeah, I didn't get to this one either. Taking a dump on Viva's homework is a political statement and should be protected under the First Amendment. It is protected under the rules of the House, primarily because I cannot stop the dogs from doing it. What do you say? Oh, yeah. Maybe my breath smells a little bad. Winston Shithouse, good to see you again. When is someone going to recognize and pursue the fact that Google, Alphabet, YouTube, yada, 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 are government creations masquerading as private corp? Discovery sue. That argument has been raised in terms of they've gotten subsidies to get where they are. They've gotten tax breaks, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, it starts tomorrow. Good. I'll be covering it. We'll see if we cover it live. It might be interesting. Pudge is alive and well. She's out there. She didn't take a dump on my homework, but she took a dump in the house. But it just comes out randomly. Now, there were some Rumble rants that I did not get to that are still, we need to integrate Rumble comments into the StreamYards app, but apparently that's a StreamYards issue and not a Rumble issue. Oh, Grammykin, $5 Rumble rant said the U.S. Capitol should be at Leavenworth, Kansas, centrally located, conveniently near prison. And I think that's the only Rumble rant that I actually got a screen grab of. The trial is just it's an absolute joke. We're still only seeing one. Oh no, we got 4,600 watching on Rumble. That was it was showing one viewer throughout the stream. I will be streaming tomorrow, guaranteed. We'll go into more detail, and maybe we'll go over the reading of the verdict. Oh, and the judge afterwards thanked the jury. Viva, you now have 1 billion reasons to play it safe. It's so preposterous. Well, I'm not worried about that. I weigh my words and verify information and correct if ever. For example, today on Twitter, I said that O.J. Simpson was found guilty in the civil trial after a trial, whereas Alex Jones was default guilty with no trial. And then the meticulous eyes of the interweb said, he wasn't found guilty in a civil trial. He was found responsible. Yeah, you got me. Anyhow, so that's it. It's outrageous stuff. Go check out Barnes Ricada on InfoWars. It's going to be special. One last thank you to the sponsor for today, HomeTitleLock.com/Viva. That link is in the bottom for property owners, homeowners who want to protect their property. I want to see if there's any more grounds. Yeah, I have not been watching the Darryl Brooks trial. That's just nuts. Hey, so Euro Wars in the Rumble section says, so how much is calling parents domestic terrorists worth? This is the irony of the Jones verdict. Both sides of the political spectrum know that it's ridiculous. It's just that one side likes the fact that it's ridiculous because it's against their ideological enemies, and they don't think it's ever going to come back to bite them in the ass. Vaush, I shouldn't impute intent into Vaush's tweet, but everyone's tweeting 965 million LOLs. Okay. If you think that that's good and you think that anyone is safe from that, yeah. Andrea Gay says, check out the Kanye West story about JPM canceling him. JPM is, that's a bank, correct? Why can't I think of what JPM is? Hold on, everyone. Let me see what JPM stock. What is that? JP Morgan Chase. Fine. Yeah, well, he put out an ill-advised Instagram post that's going to cost him a lot, it would look like. Locals is the only free space. Rum is public, aka owned by BlackRock. That is SSSSSSED. Yes, Rumble is public. Well, first of all, if you think Rumble's not safe, Rumble owns Locals. So if that's the rationale, then it's a bad logic. But Rumble is public. but still controlled by Pavlovsky. And so the risk is Pavlovsky has an about face, or something happens to Pavlovsky and the company falls into different hands. Like Barnes and I have been saying for a while, however, the platform, the company went public on warranties and representations that it would respect viewpoint neutral positions. It would adopt terms of service, which will be clear and will also be applied with no political viewpoint discrimination. If they backtrack on that, arguably class action lawsuits, much in the same way that, the arguments have been made for against other platforms. But that's the basis of their having gone public. Those were the warranties and representations to shareholders. There's always a risk. Life is risk. So if anybody thinks there's no risk in this, there is. But you have to have faith in the company, in the people. And I do. So what else? Can't sue Big Pharma. How do you like that, Jack Burton? No, you can't sue Big Pharma when big government immunizes Big Pharma with on the warranties and representations that safe and effective. And if it turns out now that the pharma had lied to the government in order to get those immunities, then maybe you could have a lawsuit. And we'll see what Barnes's lawsuit with Brooke Jackson involves down the line. So that's it. Okay, let's not get too much into what we're going to discuss tomorrow. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Go watch InfoWars. Barnes is there with Rekieta, so it should be very interesting. I might have to watch it myself after I try to take care of some housekeeping. And we'll be live tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday. During the day, tune in. Everybody, that was fantastic. Mike is an interesting guy. Article 3 project. And I'll put all the links in both Rumble and YouTube so that people can go support if they so choose. Everybody, thank you as always. Great to see you. I will see you tomorrow. Do I need to give the standard disclaimers? You've watched a man passionately describe how he's defending what he believes in. I will still stick with the mantra, and I think Mike is doing it. Do it in a way that makes your parents, your children, and your pets proud, and you can never be led astray. Go enjoy the evening. See you all tomorrow.